welcome to Idjit's Thoughts on Podcast. I am Paul Mackey. Well, Duluth is swinging too far in the other direction temperature-wise, in my opinion. We're headed above freezing a few times this week, and I'd imagine we'd have some heavy fog along with that at some point. Sure, 51 below for a wind chill wasn't very nice, but still. So we were going to go to trivia for the first time in a while tonight after a bunch of sporting events kind of knocked out Monday nights. But dinner came too close to the time, so we thought that was the case anyway. It was very close to possible to head out in the end, but we'd already canceled by then, so instead I'm producing a podcast. Let's get down to talking then about Whiz Kids episode 12, Amen to Amen Re, originally aired January 28th, 1984. That day of note. This was the night of the 41st Golden Globe Awards. The foreign critics loved Terms of Endearment, Yentl, Shirley MacLaine, and Robert Duvall. Some records news: in Fürth, West Germany, a record 295,000 dominoes were toppled. Probably on purpose. And Wayne Gretzky ended a 51-game scoring streak in an Oilers loss to his future team, the LA Kings. At the box office that week, number 5 was the premiere week for a Steve Martin movie that I frankly don't know anything about, The Lonely Guy. Number 4, Hot Dog the Movie. Number 3, Never Cry Wolf, which I remember seeing in the theater at the Highland in St. Paul, I think. Number 2 was Terms of Endearment, bumped out of the top spot this week by the new number 1, Silkwood. On the Billboard Hot 100 chart, the top 5 are telling me, as if I didn't already know, that winter of 1984 I spent quite a few weekend days at the Saints North roller rink. Number 5 was Break My Stride by Matthew Wilder. Number 4, I guess that's why they call it The Blues by Elton John. Possibly that one wasn't at the roller rink. Number 3, Talking in Your Sleep by The Romantics. Number 2, Karma Chameleon by Culture Club. And number 1 for the second week in a row, Owner of a Lonely Heart by Yes. Over in the UK, according to Music Week, number 5 was A Rockin' Good Way by Shaky and Bonnie. That would be Shakin' Stevens and Bonnie Tyler. Number 4, What Is Love? No, still not that one, by Howard Jones. Number 3, That's Living All Right by Joe Fagan from the dramedy Auf Wiedersehen Pet. Number 2, Pipes of Peace by Paul McCartney. And number 1, Relax by Frankie Goes to Hollywood, which an article a few pages earlier tells us was just banned on the BBC. So, a brief summary of Amen to Amen Re. We see cops Helen Langton and Mel Saunders meet up at a shooting range to discuss talking to Farley about police corruption. Langton knows Farley well and assures Sanders he will not reveal who he speaks to in reporting the story. Ms. Vance takes the class to the estate of eccentric actor Waltondale, a private art museum where they are to choose something from the collection to write about. She makes a point of saying there are no guards or display cases, so they need to take care. Waltondale, on the other hand, encourages them to explore for themselves and be adventurous. He talks to Jeremy about African masks and their connection to the spiritual world, and later talks to Richie about cryptography when Richie examines his Enigma machine. More on that in another section later. Both of the conversations speak toward the theme of the episode. Then Alice asks about the next room, and Waltondale takes them into his exhibit of the mummy of Amun-Re, saying the pharaoh believed that all men were divided between a good half and an evil half, both in constant battle for control. Waltondale then also explains Amun-Re was a worshipper of the god Bes. For some reason, the show has modified to Bays, who he describes as a dwarf-like creature with a grinning face who is the patron of fun and a trickster. He theorizes Bes was continually tempting Amun-Re toward his evil nature. Alice asks about the disc Amun-Re is holding, and Waltondale explains the Mirror of Death is inscribed with a coded message nobody has been able to decipher, and it might well be a curse upon those who dare disturb his tomb. Waltondale has employed special effects in this room with loudspeakers, winds, and lightning. He triggers them and disappears, and in the confusion Ham breaks a statue of Bes and improbably smuggles it out in his jacket. Farley meets with the two cops, continuing the reassurances the sources would be protected. Immediately thereafter, the DA and the head of the unit Farley is looking into try to shake him down for the source information, including a subpoena. Richie and Alice discuss Amun-Re's code while Ham appears to use white glue to repair the broken statue. Richie proposes using code-breaking software on Ralph to read the hieroglyphics from the Mirror of Death. Then Farley calls, getting Richie to download all his notes and then delete the files and all the backups before the Gazette is compelled to comply with the subpoena. He's subpoenaed a second time, and the DA says they will see Lou in court. His editor says the paper backs him 100%, and after they leave, Lou assures the editor there's a solid story on the way. Overnight, Ralph cracks the code, and brilliant traceries of the symbols radiate across the room. In the morning, Cheryl is going to wake Richie with a toy horn, but is distracted, reading out the curse on the screen. Irene wakes Richie, noticing his alarm was not set, and the two of them see the curse and also read it aloud. Cheryl comes to the kitchen dressed perfectly, and shuns sugar cereal for oatmeal, declining brown sugar as well. Richie comes in, unkempt, and snaps at Irene when she points it out. He asks Cheryl why she's not watching cartoons, and she says because they're dumb. Irene picks up a mailer with a real estate agent's phone number. Farley comes by and introduces Langton, who Richie instantly checks out, telling Farley she's good-looking. Farley asks for the file, and Richie snaps at him too, then leads them to his room. Farley and Langton look at the curse, and Lou reads it out loud. Both Lou and Langton are affected. Lou meets the judge, the Gazette's lawyer, and the DA at the judge's chambers, and says he will honor the subpoena to the shock of everyone. The judge demands the notes be delivered within 24 hours. At school, a bunch of tough guys are smoking in the boys' room, and though they start out hassling Richie, he asks for a smoke and talks tough. Back in the classroom, he backtalks the teacher, disrupts class, and tells Ham that Alice is his girlfriend, so back off. Sanders and Langton meet at the gun range, and they agree to arrange a meeting with Farley to change his mind, though Langton implies she knows what to do with squealers before shooting at the target. At the Adler house, Irene is showing a realtor around, telling Richie she's selling to his general apathy and the shock of his friends. She greedily tells the realtor she wants to get the cash from the house. The gang asks Richie to show them the curse, and he complains that computers are boring. The gang go back to Waltondale to ask about Richie and the curse. Quinn tells Farley he's normally in favor of obeying subpoenas, but warns him that he's making a mistake and may never work again. Langton calls, and Farley agrees to meet the two cops that night. Waltondale compliments Ham's restoration of the returned statue and takes them to a mystic woman, Madame Zerlina, who suggests a tea and some recitations from the Kabbalah before Waltondale tells her about the curse. She ponders over the curse issue, including the involvement of Bess, and says she'll work something up. The kids set up Ralph at the tomb display and then sprinkle magic dust around while Alice reads an incantation and Richie stares at the screen. Farley meets the cops in a remote spot, and to Sanders' shock, Langton prepares to kill Lou. The statue of Bess glows, and a wind comes up. Richie collapses, and the boys go to his aid as the mummy levitates then settles back into place. Out at the cliff, the wind blows over Farley and Langton as well, and the danger is past. The next day, Cheryl is okay with the oatmeal that her mom made, but wants lots of brown sugar. Richie is smartly dressed, and Irene runs off the realtor. Farley's story is published, but he refuses to give up his notes, and the judge agrees there is no case against him. And my favorite line:
"My young compatriots find themselves in the most grievous predicament.
Gargle with the tea made of Jimson weed, and chant a few choice phrases from the Kabbalah."
The WHOIS query. There were plenty of familiar faces guest starring on this one. Zelda Rubinstein is of course instantly recognizable, as in that favorite line quote. I thought the DA was giving Martin Sheen sort of energy, and as it happens, the DA was played by Martin's brother Joe Estevez. I also found Eugene Robert Glazer and William Boyett fairly familiar, though I couldn't quite place where from. Boyett was in 4 episodes of The Rockford Files, but no episode that I have seen yet. So this time I'll look at Kay Lenz. Kay Lenz was born in L.A. to radio engineer mother and television producer father. Her television debut was as a baby on a show that her dad was producing. She worked under stage name Kay Ann Kemper in stage and television roles as a minor, right through into her small role in American Graffiti. When she starred alongside William Holden in Clint Eastwood's Breezy, she began using her given name and also garnered a Golden Globe nomination for Female Promising Newcomer, losing out to Tatum O'Neal in Paper Moon. Whiz Kids came in the middle of a whole host of television guest spots, and also alongside her appearance in Rod Stewart's music video for his single Infatuation. She guested, among others, in Rich Man, Poor Man Book 2, How the West Was Won, Hill Street Blues, Magnum P.I., Cagney and Lacey, Matt Houston, Murder, She Wrote, Starman, Mr. Belvedere, Moonlighting, and Simon & Simon. She appeared in 3 episodes of Midnight Caller, taking home an Emmy for Outstanding Guest Actress on a Drama Series in '89, and being nominated in the same category the following year. Shortly afterwards, she was in the main cast of Reasonable Doubts, alongside Mark Harmon and Marlee Matlin. She has worked voice acting in the Wild West Cowboys of Moo Mesa, The Tick, and Adventure Time, and her most recent live-action credit on IMDb is in 2024's Sallywood. That week in tech. I didn't really spot anything to go too far in depth with. I did notice that while they were mentioning the German Enigma machine correctly, they did not actually have one on hand. I knew from looking at it that it was not actually an Enigma, but was pleasantly surprised to find out via image search that it was an American cipher machine known as a Hagelin M209, which was used during World War II by the U.S. Navy. I'm sure the one on set was likely authentic, as obsolete military equipment often ends up on sale, and by the 1980s, cryptography was fully advanced into the digital realm. I'm betting they hit that sweet spot between surplus and history. These days, it looks like one sells for anywhere between $2,000 and $6,000. Totally 80s, or aged poorly. The true sign of rebellion, smoking in the boys' room, and all the teacher does is wave away the smoke and say they ought to install a vent fan. I'm not sure I appreciated that they implied Langton couldn't hit the target well until she got cursed. There wasn't an explicit implication made, but most of the things that come to mind are probably best left to the past. Artifactoids. The actor Walton Dale's eccentric mansion museum was shot mostly on location at the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary in the Los Feliz neighborhood of L.A. The Sisters' Order was established in 1948 Spain, and the L.A. Mission was founded in 1869. The location itself was built in 1927 for an automobile designer who sold it to a Catholic philanthropist, Robert Donahoe. The Sisters pooled money to buy the estate from Donahoe after his wife's death in 1972. 52 sisters lived in the French-style chateau in those days, but by 2011 there were only 5 remaining, and the Archdiocese soon worked out an offer to sell the property to Katy Perry. Before the Archdiocese could complete the sale, the sisters, believing they owned the property and not wanting to sell it to the pop star, sold it to someone else. It became a big court battle, with the Los Angeles Superior Court eventually siding with the Archdiocese and Katy Perry, but only with Vatican approval. The Vatican had additional stipulations, so the sale eventually fell through. The house of worship on the site is still in use, but the property as a whole was relisted for sale in 2019. An Architectural Digest article I found from late 2023 stated it is unclear who actually owns it. In any case, it has been used as a shooting location many times. First up, according to IMDb, was an episode of Charlie's Angels in 1976. Other productions followed, along with Whiz Kids, including multiple episodes of Fantasy Island, The Greatest American Hero, including its pilot episode, multiple episodes of Knight Rider, The A-Team, The Powers of Matthew Starr, the 1980s Dragnet reboot movie, Alias, Charmed, Dirty Sexy Money, all the way to the most recent mention, the CW revival of 90210. On Whiz Kids, I'd expect the main mummy room where all the action took place would have been a studio set, but all the other ornate finery was on location. And a somewhat more literal artifact factoid, from what I can see, the representation of Bess is somewhat changed to fit the story. Waltondale says the god Bess is the patron of fun and a trickster. I looked at Wikipedia, so hopefully no editing trickster changed the major points when nobody was looking. Bess is described as a minor deity and drove off evil spirits and protected households. Representations of Bess would be found in typical households, and he was seen to be a protector of children and women in labor. Because of the positive aspects of his anti-evil properties, he also became the symbol of the good things in life: music, dance, and sexual pleasure. I did not find any reference to tricksterism, so the show clearly added that for the story. Considering all this, Bess would not likely have been tempting anyone toward evil, not even fictional pharaoh Amun-Re. Whatever modifications to the background they made, it does appear that they have faithfully reproduced some versions of the visual representations of Bess. What worked? I thought Max Kane as Farley was excellent in this episode. His turn was subtle and believable. The non-possessed kids also did well in their small way. I liked the computer invoking a curse and revoking a curse theme a lot more than what happens in I, Robot Eugene on Buffy almost 14 years later. The subtle score under the scenes where people are affected by the curse was just the right light touch. What didn't work? I didn't like this episode, which is odd considering how much I like other cases where characters turn bad for an episode. Thinking Xander in the Pack or Clark in Red. I think the cast has done very well overall in this series, but for this episode, Matt Laborteaux and Madeleine Kane, I just didn't feel the dark turns were as believable. I understand they probably wanted to keep some portions of the storyline lighter than others, but up against Max Gale and guest star Kay Lenz doing a great job, the contrast did not help those others. I suspect it is in the writing for Zelda Rubinstein, but she is not given her best showing here either. Last up, I like the semi-futuristic sci-fi angle they go for with the computers, and I don't think mystical fantasy blended into that as well. As much as I dislike I, Robot Eugene, it worked better with the reverse of computers in a fantasy series. Next time is Whiz Kids episode 13, Made in the USA. That's spelled like service worker made, so I guess there'll be something like that in the plot, likely from a single episode character. Irene is apparently doing fairly well for herself, and I don't think Alice would take a maid position at her age. Happy hunting! You've been listening to the One Idjit's Thoughts On podcast, produced by Paul Mackey in association with Nimlas Studios. Any short clips of audio from shows is included under fair use for commentary purposes, and copyright for that content remains with its original copyright holders. The theme song is Too Good by Jack Mangan and is used by his generous permission. One Idjit's Thoughts is produced under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. You can find more episodes of this podcast and many other fine podcasts at nimlas.org. You can contact me by emailing idjitcastpodcast@gmail.com or commenting on episodes at nimlas.org. So Irene doesn't remember the real estate agent at all, but still made Cheryl oatmeal like the day before? And Richie had to be present to break the curse, but everyone else was cured wherever they were.